Okay, I'm going to do a re-review of Codex Harlequins. I know everyone, including myself, did a review when it first came out, and we talked about all the stuff that we read in it and what seemed like it was going to be a good idea and cool options and everything, but as everyone knows, what looks good on paper isn't always what really works. So what happened with Codex Harlequins? This codex came out. I think it was one of GW's better two marketing moves for the year. I mean, they came out with Harlequins, and there were a lot of people who had Harlequins, like myself, in boxes, in cabinets somewhere, because you really couldn't run them all that effectively. They were way overpriced for what they did out of Codex Eldar, and they pulled them out of Dark Eldar. So they were out. Then they came out with the Adeptus Mechanicus, which was that other army that so many people, I think, really wanted to play. Okay, so they did that. Soon thereafter, they came out with Codex Craft Worlds, which, along with a few other things, kind of made the Harlequins fade from the forefront. People didn't really continue to play them, at least in my local area. The meta sort of had Harlequins fading. Though, that being said, they do show up in local tournaments. A couple of our statewide tournaments, there'll be at least one or two Harlequin armies, so they're still doing pretty good, and they fare well. Not excellent, but they fare well, and I would say, as a player who's now played, I bet at least 50 and maybe more games with these. They're a fun army to play. They're probably one of the most fun armies. They don't always win, they don't always lose, but they're really fun. I like Dark Eldar also. Eldar, not so much. I think they win a lot, but they're not necessarily as much fun as the Harlequins. So I'm going to run through the Codex again, talk about what experience has said really works, what doesn't work, some thoughts on it, and then include some thoughts on allies that work, that don't work, that I think will work and haven't tried. There are a few still out there. So I'm going to run through the Harlequins. This is not going to be a short video. And just go through it from the beginning to the end. So if we start at the beginning, Harlequins have their own Force Org, the Mask. Initially I thought, well, it's not a bad option, but for the review, if you're going to play a game where you're, say, 1,000 points and you're trying to play Harlequins, maybe as allies in a team tournament or a team game or something, the Mask is certainly a good option. You can do that. It's kind of bare bones at that point, but you can do it. You can get the units that you want. It may not be great at that point value, but you do get what you want out of it. It has one of the better rules for the Harlequins. I would say is one of the nice things about Codex Harlequins is, with only a few exceptions, and they're pretty limited, the Harlequins use USRs. Now, they might be like the Solitaire, where they have an entire page of their own USRs, but they don't have too many rules that are unique to them. And as a player, I like that, because your opponent, you don't have to explain, I have, polymorphine. What does that mean? Oh, it means my guy can appear next to your squad during the deployment, and you go on and on. If you say, my guys all have rending, everyone knows what that means, because every army potentially has rending. If you say everyone's got an invulnerable save, everyone knows what that means. Harlequins have a limited list of special rules, and they're brutal, but they're not quite as crazy as some of the other codices. So, if you play a Mask, you get one special rule that is unique to Harlequins. Basically, is you can run and assault, and you can do that starting on the second turn, and that for an army of Harlequins is one of the winning rules, because these guys excel in assault. That's my experience. Okay, so the Mask is a good option. It's got some limitations. It does chew up a lot of points to make it very effective, and if you go for the full-blown Mask where you fill up every Force Org slot, there's a better option. Alright, we'll get to that in a little bit. So what have I learned about the artifacts? Or the Relics of the Black Library, as they're called. There's some good and bad ones here, and some of them are mind-boggling, but the first one, I'm just going to go through them in order. Crescendo. This is the pistol that gives you as many shots as your base attack value. So if you look at the stat line on the guy that gets it, or girl, That's how many shots you get. It replaces one of your shooting weapons. You give it to a troop master, and they're going to get a fair number of shots replacing that troop master's pistol. I personally wouldn't do that. I don't like to give the troop master the shuriken pistol to begin with, but if that's what you like to do, it's such a cheap upgrade, go for it. Personal experience is the fusion gun is better. Okay. Where it does excel, and I know it's a little bit of bending the rules, but it's exactly as the rules are written. It replaces one of your shooting weapons, you give it to the Shadowseer, and if you do that, he's got his normal, or she has their normal shuriken pistol, and they have crescendo, they get 4 shots that way. All of them have that pseudo-rending blade storm ability that the shuriken weapons have. And you just replace the hallucination grenade launcher on that Shadowseer. It's not a great grenade launcher anyways. Do it. It's so cheap, it's the same price as a Haywire grenade, so why wouldn't you? Next thing on the artifact list, the Rose. You give this to the Solitaire. Pretty much, for me, it's a given. You give it to the Solitaire. Now, there are a few iffy things about the Rose as the rules are written, but let's just run through it. The Rose is a master-crafted shredding Harlequin's Kiss. The rules for the Rose and for the Harlequin's Kiss say that if the model is equipped with it, but not necessarily wielding it, one of its attacks are a Strength 6 Kiss of Death attack. Where this gets a little weird is the Solitaire has 2 close combat weapons. You're going to attack with the Caress in almost every situation, and not the Sheogorath Rose. But you still get that one attack, because of the way the rules are written, with the Rose. Does it also have Shred and Mastercrafted? That I don't know. I kind of think that it doesn't, but then also the way it's written, it might. So it's never going to be cleared up. It is something to think about, but for me, I give that to the Solitaire, hands down. Why wouldn't you? Alright. Mask. Well, you wouldn't if you interpret it as it just counts as a Kiss of Death attack, in which case, why would he take it? The Mask. The Mask is great for Harlequins. It knocks down the leadership of all sorts, pretty much anything within 12 inches, unless they have some sort of shenanigan that lets them keep their leadership from going down. The Mask is great. So many Harlequin abilities, and even just winning close combat, involve leadership checks, morale checks. You want this. It goes on a Shadowseer. There's no doubt you're going to take it. The Laughing God's Eye. This gives you adamantine will, basically. It improves the deny the witch rolls. It's an expensive artifact. It's going to depend on your local meta. I don't use it. I've run it in a few lists, and it never makes its point back for me. But I don't play against a ton of Eldar or Grey Knights or something that have a lot of psychic powers that might be targeting me. So if you do, then I guess it's good. Okay. Last 2 artifacts, the Starmist Raiment. I inevitably put this on my Warlord, who's always a Troop Master. It gives that individual a 3+ invulnerable save when they run. And I also inevitably always forget to run said Troop Master at a critical moment when they will need it. So I think it's an expensive relic. It certainly has a place, and if you're the player who can remember to run your Troop Master instead of shooting with them, when you need that 3++, then take it. But for me, even though I will still keep taking it probably, it's just a point sink because I forget that they should run instead of shooting. So I think it's quite a situational relic. Is expensive too. Alright, the last relic is mind-boggling, and that's the Storied Sword. It's a master-crafted AP3 +1 strength sword for 20-some points. I don't know why you'd take it. It's going to be on a Troop Master, and that Troop Master could take a cheaper weapon like a Caress that's going to wound at AP2 more often than a Strength 4 or 5 sword at AP3 will. a caress can destroy a vehicle. I mean, Strength 5 sword with AP3 could destroy a vehicle, but not most vehicles. I mean, you're talking about armor 11 could be glanced by it, so you could wreck a Rhino easily, and not even easily. It's way too expensive of an artifact. It's just a weird one that it's there, and I would say, of the artifacts, it's the failure. Now, moving into the units, because we're just going through the codex in the order that it's presented, and this is from my experience. The troops, who are also troops, and your only troop choice, and I guess I should state here, and this is relevant for the whole codex, as fun as Codex Harlequins is, with all the variability and in play, it's still really limited in the number of units you can bring. It only has one troop choice. It only has, basically one fast attack, because it's got a transport also. It's got one heavy. It's got 3 elites, but one of them's unique. And 2 of them are kind of hard to use, except they're in very limited lists. They're great, but you can't get them on all the formations. So, it is a fun codex to use, but it is limited in some ways. You're going to use a lot of the same tactics again and again, which could get boring. So I have fun with it. It's one of my most fun codices to play, but I could easily understand getting bored with Codex Harlequins and not getting bored with Codex Dark Eldar. Or if you like Eldar, I assume you could play Codex Craft Worlds and have all sorts of fun with them. Because those 2 codices just have so many viable options. You have tons of fast attack and elite and heavies, and not so much for Harlequins. So, moving back to the troops. This is the core of your army. Except in a few formations, these guys are going to pull the weight. They have pluses and minuses. No matter what you do, they're toughness 3 with a 5++. They die when they get shot at. They die in close combat, but close combat they excel in because they're hard to hit. So when you look at these, you have to think, I have to keep these guys either in a vehicle or somehow keep them from getting mauled. There are ways to do it. My experience is you keep them in the vehicles, you get as close as you can, you shoot your opponent up, and then you jump out and assault. And you win the assault. Hopefully you actually win the assault in their turn. You lock them for a turn and demolish them, but lock them so that you don't get shot up, because you're still going to be better in close combat than getting shot. Out in the open, these Harlequins just die. Nothing you can do about it. There are tricks you can play using, in particular, the other codices, but Harlequins have a few tricks you can play with telepathy and with phantasmancy, the psychic powers. Yes, you can keep your Harlequins alive against shooting to some degree, but even then, there's just a limit to how well it works. Something like invisibility is great, or the shrouded power in telepathy, or even the one that basically targets another unit and makes everything invisible to it. They're all great, but you got to roll for them. There's situational. So my experience with Harlequin troops, great viability, but if you get shot at, you're in trouble. Should they be outfitted? This is all from my experience in playing. It's from playing a lot of games, and from playing, I've played the Harlequins against most armies now. I played them against Dark Angels and Blood Angels and Orcs and not Tyranids, Sisters of Battle and Grey Knights and, Dark Angels, White Scars, all those. I've played against all of them. I've beaten almost all of those armies. I've played against Harlequins themselves, against them and with them. So in tournaments I've played against them. So, I'll tell you what I've seen and what it appears to work. In terms of the shooting weapons, as expensive as it is, I would outfit everyone with a shooting weapon. Don't stay with the shuriken pistol. It's not that versatile. It's great in a pinch. If you roll a 6, it'll wound anything, but It's only a strength 4 gun. It's not that great. It doesn't have a large number of shots. Now, the Harlequins have a good ballistic skill. They'll probably hit. But strength 4. My personal experience is take the fusion guns. The Melta pistols, 6-inch range. I realize it's really short range. But there's strength 8 AP1. There's not a model in the game that gets an armor save against it. And there's not a vehicle in the game that is immune to strength 8. Other than some sort of weird super heavy that has armor 15 and ceramite plating. Even things with ceramite plating, you shoot him with strength 8, there's a decent chance that you will still pen them or glance them. There are very few models in the game that are toughness 10, so even if you're toughness 9, that strength 8 gun wounds you on a 5, and if you're not toughness 7, then it wounds you on a 2, and you get no armor save. So it's a good versatile pistol, and you're going to assault with the Harlequins, so I would take it. The ups and downs to it against vehicles are, if you're going to use it for the Melta rule, you have to be within 3 inches of the vehicle, and it's probably going to explode. One of the things I've learned with the Harlequins, and it's important when shooting vehicles, based on how the rules are written, the troop master has to be rolled separately. If you're worried about this, he would roll him separately from the rest of the troop because he has a different ballistic skill. So his weapon is actually technically different. Roll him first, because if he pens the vehicle and doesn't blow it up, those other shots aren't rolled yet. As far as I understand the rules, you have a chance of wrecking it with him and not blowing it up and killing yourself. But even if you're shooting at 6 inches from inside a troop transport, Melta pistols, my experience, are the way to go. The neural disruptors, which are good, I mean, they're AP2, they're going to wound anything they shoot at. They have no strength, so they can't hurt vehicles. They got a better range, but there are just so many vehicles in this game that if you outfit your guys with the inability to take out vehicles from shooting, that's a problem. Now, what do I do with my troops? I never take troops that are more than 6 unless I'm taking allies. I usually take troop sizes of 5, and that way I can put a Shadow Seer or a Death Jester in with them and put them in a transport. Yeah, those transports are 2 whole point paper bags with an invul save, but if the transport blows up, every person inside gets hit once. There's a good chance the transport won't blow up in real play. They don't blow up as often as you would think, and those transports let you move up to 24 inches in one round. So if you want to get your Harlequins really close to something, the transports are the way to go. Big squads are a problem. There's options to get around it, like deep striking with a webway, or putting them in a raider, and then you could put a whole bunch in a raider and jump out, or a Tantalus. I've never tried that because I don't own a Tantalus, but that would be cool. You could drop like 16 Harlequins out of it, or Harlequins and other independent characters. That being said, other things. If you look at the weapons on the troop, they can take caresses, embraces, or kisses. Once again, from personal in-play experience, the caress is the way to go. It's the most expensive, so this makes my basic troop choice 210 points. I realize that is astronomical for 5 toughness 3, 5++ elves, but it makes them hit like a friggin' sledgehammer. And even if there's just one surviving elf with a Melta pistol, it can take out Land Raider, and it can kill a Terminator or anything in the Marine Codex that isn't toughness 5 with one shot. The Caress is the most expensive close combat weapon, but you wound or glance on a 6 to hit, and you can't beat that because it massively increases the number of wounds that Harlequins do, and they can wound anything in the game, even a gargantuan monstrous creature. There. The Embrace, where they get the D3 Strength 6 Hammer of Wraths, I've played against this. Not only does it involve a lot of measuring because you have to base on the charge, but after that first round, if you don't wipe out your target with your AP 0, there's no AP on that Hammer of Wrath. If you don't wipe out your target, you don't get it the next round. If you hit and run, there's actually a good chance you'll get out of charge range because you end up hit and run 12 inches away, and then you're trying to get back to charge. I mean, usually you do, but my experience is the Embrace, not so great. The Harlequin Kiss, that would be the classic weapon of the Harlequins from the previous edition. It's got rending, but you're going to do more wound. It's got rending on one attack. Strength 6 instant death. On one attack, I'm unimpressed. The Caress is just more likely to do AP2 wounds automatically than the Kiss. The only character that I bother with the Kiss is the Solitaire because he comes with it. So, other than that, I wouldn't take the Haywire grenades on the Troop Master. I don't know why you would, because you could give him a fusion pistol, in which case he could break any vehicle in the game, unless you're worried it's going to explode. Or he's got a Caress in my army, so he just punches it, and on a 6 to hit it, he glances it. There's not a vehicle that can survive a bunch of glances. So that's how I outfit troops. They've worked really well. My tactics with them is to get him in that vehicle, get him up close, jump out, and assault. Jump out, shoot, and assault. The only times that I don't do that is when you go up against horde armies. If you go up against orcs, for example, and they have lots and lots of orcs, don't jump out of the transport and charge until you've shot them a few times, because orcs actually have a hard time close combating an armor value 10 vehicle. They'll probably break it, but at strength 4 on the charge, or 5 depending on what they are. I guess there's some that are even more, but they're actually only glance the thing most of the time. And it's got an invul save. So, same with guardsmen. Shoot them from the vehicle before you charge. Okay. Moving on. Next in the codex are the Death Jesters. If you read online, a lot of people were excited about them, and then they whined about the Death Jester, and they said, he's kind of a point sink, and he's fluffy, but he's not that good. No, he's great. The list of fearless armies in 40k is small. They're demons, a few of the Dark Eldar. If you play Homunculus Covens, they're fearless. I think those are the only armies I can think of where the entire army is fearless. Even They Shall Know No Fear does not protect them against the Death Jesters. So Death Jesters. This is the old Death Jester, who you never see because I think the new models are better. But what does the Death Jester do? The Death Jester is a really versatile character. He's an independent character in most builds, so he can be attached to most units. He has a Strength 6 gun with Ballistic Skill 5, and he's basically got the sniper role. He's got precision shot, so it's actually sniping, with 3 shots. And it's an assault weapon. It's short range, 24 inches, but it's not really short, and the guy can move. The cover does not exist for Harlequins in terms of movement. They just travel through it. They don't make dangerous terrain tests or difficult terrain tests, and they just travel through terrain. So he's pretty good. I mean, on his own, you can hide him and then pop him out and shoot. Strength 6, once just kind of like the Strength 8. There aren't a lot of things that handle Strength 6 in the game. So he's got this gun, 3 shots, Strength 6. It's AP2 when you wound on a 6. It's got the sniping ability. His other shot is the 1-shot poisoned 2 pinning, and then the target explodes. I've used that gun. It's specifically useful against really clustered targets, but usually, in reality, you only hit 2 more models, and when they explode, they're usually not any more likely to wound than the Shuriken Cannon was. So, it sounds cool, and against certain cultists and guardsmen and orcs, it can do a good job because it's pinning, and because if you manage to hit on a 6, you can pick the target, and so you put it right in the center of a blob and blow it up. It's not that great. Now, the main reason that Death Jesters are cool is because they have Death is Not Enough. And that rule is very clearly written. If you cause a casualty from the the Shrieker Cannon, the unit has to take a leadership test at -2 or run in the direction you choose. And the rules in the main rulebook say that if you run off the table, your unit is gone. It also does not say you have to use the Shrieker round. That's that round that's got the one shot that causes the explosion. It says the Shrieker Cannon. It's very clear. So either one of his rounds from the Shrieker Cannon, which is the weapon profile, both of those cause that rule. Death is not enough works on every army out there that's not fearless. It makes sure that people keep their models, if they're near a Death Jester, away from the edge of the board. They do that because all you have to do is kill one guy and they'll run off the edge of the board. And that's the glory of Death Jesters. You can also position people so it's easier to charge them. I've done that, but realistically, nothing beats running an entire blob of 30 guys or 10 Space Marines where you kill one and they just run off the board. You can even do that to things like Thunderwolf Cavalry. Absolutely hilarious. Makes the Death Jester worth his points. He's a cheap model. And I don't take upgrades on him. I don't think there's any upgrade that's worth taking. Maybe the Laughing God's Eye. No. He can also be put in a vehicle, and so he's possibly he can fly around and shoot. Okay. The other elite, Shadowseer. Shadowseer is a Psyker. He's kind of got like a somewhat, like he's got his own Crozius, but it's not really a Crozius. But it's basically going to be +2 to his strength when he charges in and hits with it, and it's Fleshbane. So it's a high strength weapon. He's got a pistol. He's got psychic powers. He's an independent character. He's a Force Org booster that excels. The Shadowseers are great. How I run them is I usually put them in my troops, in my transports at the start of the game. Now, they have a disadvantage there that they can't use their maledictions and the blessings on their squad or on anyone else because they're in a transport. But the experience has been leaving them out in the open, they get killed. But with that squad, they make a great second character in the squad, so if you really don't want to accept a challenge, but you kind of have to for some reason, or you don't want to issue a challenge, but you kind of have to because you have, the objective to issue a challenge, Shadowsteer does it. He wounds on a 2 in close combat, so, there's even against gargantuan creatures, he wounds on a 2 because it's a Fleshbane weapon. So he's okay. His psychic powers are where he excels. He's got... In my experience now, he has 3 awesome psychic disciplines. The first one is Sanctic Demonology. A lot of people would say, I'm never going to use that. It's a crazy power to take. It's not. A lot of the powers in it are Warp Charge 1. Yeah, there's some Warp Charge 3 powers, like the D-Blast. Okay, yeah. But, the Primaris power, you're probably not going to use it unless you play against demons. But Sanctuary and Hammerhand, for example, which are really good powers for Harlequins. You get Hammerhand off with Harlequins, then they are strength 6 when they charge in. That's awesome. And if you're like a Shadowseer and you have Hammerhand with your Misstav and Furious Charge, you're looking at some pretty serious abilities. And we're going to talk about allies later, but if you have Furious Charge on Dark Eldar, also works. Okay, so Sanctic Demonology's worked out for me really well. Sanctuary is another great one. It gives you a 4++, or better, I guess. Phantasmancy, which is the special psychic power of the Harlequins, it's a great power. There's not a power in there that's bad. Even ones that are like Shards of Light, where you're like, strength 3 shooting, it doesn't matter when they're blinding. Blinding weapons are great. Some of the powers like Laugh of Sorrows can be hideously devastating to the unit who gets hit with it. Particularly if you boost it with something like the Mask and maybe Dark Eldar allies. Or I think Craftworld allies could even help there. So Phantasmancer is a great force amplifier. Even lone Shadow Seers allied to another unit or hiding in a corner and casting their psychic powers, they're great. Strongly support them. They're a great option. I usually keep them attached to my troops, at least at the start of the game. Now, the last psychic power is telepathy. There's not a bad thing in telepathy, and one of the great things about telepathy is you get Psychic Shriek. And your Shadow Seers, if you play them right, one of them's going to take the mask, and the mask will take 2 off your opponent's leadership, so Psychic Shriek becomes even more devastating when you do that. Personally, the way I run the Shadow Seers is to put the mask on one of them, and I almost always give that Shadow Seer telepathy, because I'm thinking about things like Terrify and Psychic Shriek, maybe hallucinations. There's a couple powers where their leadership checks involved with the target of the power, and you want the person with the mask to be able to knock their leadership down. I usually give one Shadow Seer the Crescendo pistol and take away their hallucination grenade launcher, and that one I'm going to give something else, so maybe Phantasmancy or Sanctic Demonology. The one that's in the largest squad, the largest troop, usually has Sanctic Demonology because they want to give Hammerhand. You don't always get it. I mean, I run them at level 2 usually, so there's a 1 in 3 chance I get Hammerhand. When they do get the D-Blast, hilarious when it works. I don't know if you probably see the battle report where I remove my own character from existence, but it's a D weapon. And it's not a horribly overpowered D weapon because it's actually a high risk when using it. Okay. So that's that on the Shadow Seers. I guess the last thing to mention with them is they come with the hallucination grenade launcher. That is one of their standard war gear. It is a shooting weapon, so you can replace it with Crescendo. It's got a good range, 18 inches. It's been extremely underpowered for what it appears to do, and the Codex makes it sound really cool. It's a pinning grenade launcher, but it's such low strength that it's actually not likely to do much, and then you're going to lose one more model if they fail a morale check. So there's that. Alright. The last elite in the Codex is the Solitaire. You can only take one. The Solitaire is a unique character. Solitaire is the Saint Celestine of the Harlequins. The most annoying, hard to kill, highly maneuverable, lethal in close combat character out there. Everyone I play against, if they've never experienced it, they remember on round 2 or game 2, and the Harlequin, you have to target him, you have to shoot him a lot, you have to lock him down in combat. He's just really hard to kill, and he will always score back his points times something. He's a cheap model. I always give him a Haywire Grenade, by the way, but he's a cheap model, and he's just devastating in close combat. He gets 12 attacks when he blitzes, which he could do in round 1 if your opponent did something weird, like happened to me in a tournament when the White Scars scouted and then turbo boosted up, and he just blitzed on round 1, moved 3 inches, charged, and wiped out the entire squad. So Solitaire. As I mentioned, always give him the Haywire Grenade because it's the only way to give the Solitaire a shooting attack. It's 5 points. Yeah, it's a low-strength shooting attack, but why wouldn't you take it? You can still wound toughness 4 models with it on a 6, and you can Haywire tanks. So, take it. You're never going to use it in close combat, but I don't see why you would. So, Solitaire is the grand champion model in my experience with this army. He is, however, a Solitaire. He's a lone character, so his Force Org boosting ability is less than the Death Jester and the Shadow Seer. That's a given. Alright, moving on. The Void Weavers and the Sky Weavers. The Star Weavers and the Sky Weavers. The Transport and the Bikes. The Transport for the Harlequins is okay. It's got the ability to take a 4+ invulnerable save once a game, and that is far better than you think just looking at it. Because the vehicle's unlikely to survive the whole game anyways, and that 4+, particularly if you run it right, makes your vehicle kind of survivable in round 1, which is all you really need to get your Harlequins up in close combat with most armies. It's a fast skimmer. It's open-topped. It's got 2 strength 6 cannons with a 24-inch range that have the sort of rending rule, but not really, the blade storm rule. That vehicle is a lot better than you would think, and it even has the ability to take out a lot of flyers. Strength 6 guns, if you get 6 shots, you're likely to hit once, and it's a really maneuverable vehicle, so you can often get behind flyers and shoot them in the back, and Strength 6 can pop even an Imperial flyer. It's not great, but there aren't many ground troops that can handle 6 Strength 6 shots. It does a lot of damage, and particularly if you rend, so even things like Obliterators or Centurions and stuff, those take some pretty serious damage from multiple Strength 6 shots, and if you put a Death Jester in your transport, you get another 3 shots. The transports, don't expect them to last very long, but they do their job. Alright, the other option in the fast attacks are the bikes, and this is the one place in the Codex where I felt like Games Workshop let me down. The bikes. The bikes are cool, they look nice, they're far better than the old Harlequin bikes. What the bikes don't have is move through cover, skilled rider, or assault grenades. Even though the riders on the bikes are clearly outfitted with flip belts, which means they ignore cover, the bikes don't. Which means the Harlequin bikes, they get damaged when they move through cover because they take dangerous terrain tests. They go last when they assault most units because most people hide in terrain when they are worried they're going to be assaulted, and so the darn bikes. It's just a sad thing for me. Now, outside of that, they're not too expensive. You could run a lot of them. I just one of the viable options with the Harlequins is to run a mostly bike list. You could run an all-bike skimmer list. You do it, they do okay. They have shuriken cannons, and as bikes, they shoot in any direction they want. You can put haywire launchers on them. I usually outfit them with both haywire and shuriken, and that way you can damage vehicles, and the haywire is a blast, and it's AP4, so it does hurt a lot of units. The really lethal thing for the bikes is their Star Bolos, which are close range, 12-inch range blasts, but they're kind of like plasma. I mean, they're strength 6 AP2. So against most infantry, marine equivalents, they do a lot of damage, and people know this. The option with the bikes is also to give up those bolos and give them the glaive. And the glaive gives them pretty serious AP2 close combat weapons. But the fact that they don't have assault grenades is what's devastating for them, because it means they go last in a lot of combats against guys who don't want to be charged with AP2 high-strength weapons on models with high weapon skill. Yeah, so, I've been unimpressed with the bikes, though I think you could run an all-bike army very effectively, and they're extremely mobile. The final thing in the Harlequin's Codex is the Voidweaver, which is the heaviest, the only heavy choice. A lot of the internet, if you believe the internet says this is a tax, it's not a good unit. I disagree. It's not horribly expensive. It has 2 shuriken cannons, one underslung, one off the back, and another cannon. I always upgrade it to a prism cannon. I wouldn't take it with haywire, not at the cost of the upgrade. And it's a prism cannon. It's a strength 7 lance, or a strength 5 AP3 blast, or a strength 3 AP5 blast that's large. That's a great option. I've personally run them in squadrons of 3 often when I run my Sheogorath's Revenge, and they score their points back. There aren't a lot of units that can take all the shooting the Voidweaver can put out. And the fact that if you fly them right, that rear-facing gun gets a different target. Or if you face it I refuse to fly them backwards, and to do that goofy, I shoot everything off the back. But maybe if you face them sideways, and sometimes you can shoot the same unit with both guns, or it's not a bad choice. I personally find the Void Weavers to be quite effective. I don't think that they're attacks. And finally, on the Void Weaver, one of the real world benefits to the Void Weaver, it has a surplus of extra models, as does the transport. They're the same model, they just have different builds. If you build it right, you get 2 or 3 extra Harlequin troop members. Maybe a guy in a trench coat could even be a troop master. But regardless, when you buy those heavies or transports, you get extra models, which aren't that difficult to model into usable models for the game. So you don't even have to buy the troops in the troop box if you're buying the transports. That's my experience. Okay, I'm going to move on to the formations. If you move through the codex and you're onto the formations, this is where there's good builds, bad builds, and kind of how you play the Harlequins in ways that work. And I'm looking at this right now as just Harlequins. I'll talk about the allies in a second. So running through the formations, we already talked about the mask. It's the foundational formation, though it's really no different than the others. It codifies what you have to have. I think if you're going to play just Harlequins, there's maybe... I can think of 3 functional ways to play the Harlequins as pure Harlequins, and to make it work. The first way, the way that I've found to be the absolutely most effective for me, is to play the Sheogorath's Revenge. When you do this, I usually end up with a 2,000 point list, but I can also do an 1850 list pretty easily. But to do it, you have to have 3 troops, 2 squads of bikes, 1 squad of heavies, 3 Shadow Seers, 3 Death Jesters, and the Solitaire. And I think if you're playing Harlequins, you're taking transports for those troops. So it is a complete mask. You fill up every slot in the mask. So why is Sheogorath's Revenge better than a mask? Because it has one absolutely game-changing, in my opinion, and real-world experience rule for the Harlequins. It lets them re-roll 1s on their invul saves. And this means that they're kinda not that effective 5++, gets almost as good as a 4+. And in the case of the Shadow of the Solitaire, or anyone wearing the Star Mist Raiment, if they remember to run, which I always forget to do, it makes the Solitaire the most annoyingly unkillable character in the game, because he has a 3+ invulnerable save that re-rolls 1s. Yeah, sometimes you roll 3 2s on the first time you get shot with las pistols, but usually you don't. And that Solitaire can stick the game for a long time, killing so many more points than he's worth, and doing whatever you want because he's really mobile. So that makes the Solitaire awesome. It also means that if you get Sanctuary off with Sanctic Demonology, you get a 4+ re-rolling 1s, and that makes whatever unit has it just that much harder to kill, and it really does make a difference. So this is where I would say you're going to play a Harlequin army. Personal experience, this is the best one. Alright, Serpent's Brood is the next formation in the book, and this one, no, I say it's a failure. You take troops and some heavies and stuff, but the main gist of this formation is you can consolidate into or hit and run into the transports out of combat. So you can jump out of a transport, attack, and then jump back into the transport, only from the formation. Now, characters can do it attached to the troop. So I guess you could, there are ways you could do this and have some sort of funny little extra shenanigans. Heck, you could have a Phoenix Lord in with that troop. But Yeah, the transports aren't that survivable, and when your opponent knows what you're going to do, they're going to shoot them apart. Um, and the other issue is the way that the hit and run rules are written. You don't get to choose the distance you hit and run. You're going to hit and run in a direction at a certain distance, so you can easily overshoot your transport. So I would say Serpent Brood, no. Cast of characters. This is really the old Harlequin from Codex Dark Eldar and Codex Eldar, the previous editions, when they had Harlequins. You take Harlequins, they end up with a Shadowseer and a Death Jester, and they're all on one squad. And, yeah, it's the old Harlequins with the new rules. It's not bad. It works okay. It doesn't work as running it as your own army. It has one huge limitation. While you could take a dedicated transport, you can't fit in it. Because you'll have at least one too many clown. So cast of characters in a pure Harlequin army, not that good. In an allied, actually, in real world experience, I think Harlequins don't make the greatest allies. They do okay, but they're too expensive to really sink all those points into. So cast of characters is okay. Its main bonus is that it gives Crusader to any Eldar or Dark Eldar within a range. The one way you can play this in an allied list that kind of has a bit of shenanigan to it is that the transport, you could take a dedicated transport for the troop squad. Nothing says you can't, and it would be part of the formation. And if you park it right at the beginning of the game, you could embark into it with Fire Dragons or Howling Banshees or Striking Scorpions or Incubi, and you would have the Crusader rule for that. Or if you just fly that transport up behind the Corpse Claw Thief from the Dark Eldar's Covenant supplement, it gives them Crusader. It's a little bit of a bonus. It's not great. So cast of characters, yeah. Okay. The Sheogorath Jest, this is like a mini mask. It's the way you would use Dark Eldar as allies. Its downside is that it's troops and bikes and a heavy. It gets Rising Crescendo so they can run an assault. Sheogorath's Revenge gets that. The mask gets it. It's okay as an ally. You would never, I think, take it as your main army unless you're running a really low point game. Hero's Path. This is the way to ally Harlequins with other armies. I actually have used it in my pure Harlequins list, and I'll talk about that in a second. But the Hero's Path is a Solitaire, a Shadowseer, and the Death Jester. They lose the independent character rule, but they get they're basically going to end up with 2-up cover saves. They'll get the Shrouded Stealth rules. And Infiltrate, which is a great downside for the Solitaire because he can't assault on round 1. And he has to infiltrate because that's what the rules say. It's an okay way to field them. It makes a good way to use them as allies. The downside to this, and my real-world experience with this formation, is it's not hard to kill individual toughness 3 2-wound models that have a 2-up cover save. Because they lose the independent character, you can never stick those models in another squad. And one of the ways to keep Death Jesters and Shadowseers alive is to connect them to something, and they can't do that. And Solitaires, without rerolling ones, he shouldn't be hanging out in cover anyways. He needs to be assaulting. And so in close combat, his bonus cover save doesn't really help him. Okay, but Hero's Path is a good way to use the massive force boosting ability of the Shadowseer with Phantasmancy in a game with allies, or with a kind of flexible dark Harlequin list. The last one is Falchu's Blade, which is 2 squads of bikes and 1 squad of heavies. And this and the Sheogorath Jest, I have seen them played effectively in tournaments, so that's a competitive setting. I've seen them played competitively there and effectively, and the way to do it is you max out the bike squads. So you take a whole bunch of bikes with shuriken cannons that have a 4+ invulnerable save once a game, and they jink like normal, but they re-roll it, so they have a really high ability to take a good jink. And it actually says they re-roll their cover save when they jink, so if they're stealthed while jinking or something, they're even better. So Falchu's Blade is not bad if you're going to run an all-bike list. I mean, Craft Worlds is probably better points-wise, but it's close. And Dark Eldar, you can't run an all-bikes list in Dark Eldar because bikes aren't troops. So it's not bad. Same thing with Sheogorath Jest. I've seen that with maxed out bikes in a tournament, and the guy did really well. So that's where it is. That's it for the Harlequin's Codex in terms of, what my real world experiences is. I think I covered all the upgrades you could do. I would say that my real experience is the 3 ways that I've built or seen Harlequins played. 1 is Sheogorath's Revenge. 2 is bike heavy, either Sheogorath Jest or Falchu's Blade, or a combination of those 2. And the 3rd way to do it is to run Hero's Path and Falchu's Blade and either a cast of characters or a mask or a jest or so in there, and you can multiple formation build. The downside I've had is I've actually played that against Sheogorath Revenge, where we had the same models in our army, and the Sheogorath Revenge won every time because it was just more survivable with the re-rolling of invul saves. Things like the Falchu's Blade get to re-roll their jink save, but its jink saves don't work on things like close combat. So I would say that's a good option. It is important to remember my personal experience when you play the Revenge. If you're going to rely on the invulnerable save as a re-rolling of 1s, there are times where your other saves are better and you can't choose to re-roll a 1. So you have a 3-up cover save and you roll a 1, you don't get to re-roll it if you have a 5-up invulnerable save. You can't say, well, I'm re-rolling it because it's my invul save. You always take the best save. The rulebook says that's the case. So if you have 2 saves that are the same, invul is the one you're going to take because you're going to re-roll it if it's a 1. So that's that. What about allies? How to run Harlequins as a not pure Harlequin list. Now, I think there's 2 ways to do it. One is to take a small low point allies contingent with the Harlequins in something like a Sheogorath's Revenge plus. And the other is to run allies and run a mask or something that's sort of lower in terms of Harlequins. Or run a huge high point game, but in the local meta where I am, 2,000 points is probably the average. I don't think anyone plays 3,000 or 4,000 point games that aren't Apocalypse. So, if you look at the codices that ally well with Harlequins, obviously the Eldar and Dark Eldar, they're blood brothers. They can get in each other's vehicles. They join each other's units. They're great. They have a lot of obvious synergy. There are some funny. There's some absolutely fluff-destroying combinations that also work with Harlequins. So let me just mention this. And yeah, I know the Demon's Codex is going to change at some point, and I personally have a dislike for totally fluff-destroying lists. I don't think I would ever, outside of a joke, run Drazar and Karandras in the same squad of Incubi out of the Dark Eldars. This is wrong. I don't think I would ever take Come the Apocalypse allies of Swarmlord and Marneus Calgar or something. It's just not right. So, there are some, however, that do work well for Harlequins, kind of. So one of them is to take demon allies and take the Mask of Slaanesh, the ultimate Slaanesh character, though she is kind of a renegade. she can prevent units that she targets from moving or overwatching or knocks them down to ballistic skill or weapon skill 1. That's a really strong force org modifier for Harlequins, and considering that she is really cheap as a demon ally, along with Nurglings or Demonettes, it's a viable option. And with just a couple models, literally you can run it with 4 models, and it's less than 200 points, so it's pretty easy to do. So it's an option. Skarbrand, who maybe he'll get new rules, I don't know. But Skarbrand, because he gives everyone hatred around him, and Harlequins pretty much always strike first, if you run Skarbrand as an allied demon contingent with your Harlequins, he makes them really effective in close combat, particularly if they have caresses, because every time they miss on a 2 and 1, they get to re-roll, and then there's a chance I'll roll a 6 and just, maul something. So he's a good option. There are a few other funny ones, like Adeptus Mechanicus, unfortunately are really expensive, like Harlequins, so it's hard to run them in the same list if you run a high Harlequin list, but they can do things like affect people's toughness, or initiative, or weapon skill, or leadership, or all of the above. And so it becomes far more effective if you can get them together. The downside with Demons and Adeptus Mechanicus and some of these other ones is that they could just have the one eye open rule and freeze the Harlequins, so no one moves. Okay. There are other builds. I haven't tried all of these other ones. I don't own any Space Marine armies, for example. Inquisitors are a good option. They have the same thing where if they can charge into combat with the Harlequins, they can really mess up the target of the Harlequins. So, psychotropic grenades from the Xenos Inquisitor can do a number on a close combat squad anyways. With Harlequins, they can do a lot. They can't join each other's squads, so there's some disadvantage there. Alright, so on to the ones that really matter. Dark Eldar and Craplords Eldar. I like Dark Eldar. They're my favorite Eldar army outside of the Harlequins. I don't really like Craplords Eldar. And I should mention that Corsairs are an option, but since there's all the rumors that they're going to be upgraded, I'm not even going to really talk about them outside of to say they're an option. So, Dark Eldar. How do Dark Eldar work with Harlequins? Dark Eldar have probably better transports. The Raider can hold a larger number of clowns than the Harlequin's own transports, and they're blood brothers, so they can get in it, and they can buy it as a fast attack, and so they're not even dedicated transports. So the Dark Eldar have that. The Venom, I actually don't think the Venom is as good a vehicle as the Harlequin's Skimmer, because the Venom has a 5+ invulnerable save, the Harlequin one has a 4+ once a game, and if you take it in the Revenge, it rerolls 1s, and Falchu's Blade, it rerolls Jinx, so I think the Venom's got a use, but the Harlequin's boat's probably better, but the Raider and the Tantalus, that's way too expensive. The Raider really does have a use for the Harlequin, because you can put a lot of them in it. Okay. Basic Dark Eldar. All of the Dark Eldar headquarters units, with the exception of Drazhar, all work well with basic Harlequins. And even Drazhar, if he's attached to an Incubus squad with a Shadow Seer, becomes really hard to kill because of the psychic powers. So you get a good synergy with the Dark Eldar. And you can also use the cheese of taking a Lamian for 10 points, just so you get your Dark Eldar allied contingent with the 10-point, 1 wound Warlord, or not Warlord, but HQ. The basic Eldar, Dark Eldar troops, they work okay with Harlequins. There's nothing special. Harlequins are better than witches. They may not shoot as far as Cabalites, but they're not that cool. The elites, the Mandrakes, I think Mandrakes got so much better than they used to be, but they don't really play that well with Harlequins. They're kind of different. they do have infiltrate, and so they can help each other a little bit, but they're not going to play that well together. They're kind of different. The Incubi, however, do play well with Harlequins. You can take Incubi, you can put them in the Harlequin transport, or you can put them in their own transport as allies. It's not that hard to actually run I've done the list, and it works. You take a Sheogorath's Revenge, and you can run Incubi with your Harlequins, and they're potentially a better close combat unit than the Harlequins against many targets. Not all. There's some hard targets where Harlequins clearly win because Incubi don't have assault grenades. But they are AP2, they're always strength 4, they could be strength 5 if they have Furious Charge. They have 3-up armor and feel no pain, so they're a lot more survivable against many, many targets than the Harlequins. So that being said, I like Incubi. Racks and Grotesques, I would say no on the Grotesques, are too expensive. They make their own great Dark Eldar units, but they don't make great allies to the Harlequins. The Racks, if you take them from the Coven supplement, which we'll talk about in a second, they're good. You move it into the Hellions and Scourges and Reaver jet bikes. Those all have good anti-vehicle abilities on the jet bikes and on the Scourges, which could help the Harlequins. I've not tried it, actually. I find the Reaver jet bikes are probably better in many ways than the Harlequin's jet bike. They do have move through cover, and they can take multiple weapons, but I think you have enough mobility as Harlequins. I'm not sure you do it, and I have to say I haven't tried it. The Flyers, however, both the bomber and the jet fighter, why wouldn't you take that with the Harlequins is a good question. If you know you're going to go up against other air, take the jet fighter. The bomber's a little too expensive for what it's worth, but the jet fighter, he's a solid choice. It can shoot down most flyers in the game, unless you roll poorly. You can shoot all those missiles in, or fire those dark lances. It's a good flyer. Outside of that, the pain engines and the parasite engines and the Ravager and stuff, they're expensive, and things like the parasite engine don't really help the Harlequin, so skip it. The Coven supplement, however, Dark Eldar Covens, or Homunculus Covens. Here's a good way to run something with Harlequins. If you're going to run a mostly Harlequin army, the Scarlet Epicureans or the Scalpel Racks, good options. If you can figure out how to run a base Covens detachment, that's also an option. Eats up a lot of points, but the reason that Scarlet Epicureans or the basic Covens are good is the Homunculus. Sorry, I have to edit that. The Homunculus gives them Fearless on round 1, and Fearless Harlequins are good. He doesn't have hit and run, but it doesn't matter. The downside to these allies is they can't run an assault. The Scalpel Racks, modified leadership, which is good for the Harlequins. The Scarlet Epicureans, not only do they give that Fearless with their one attached Homunculus, but kill him. Make him your warlord, and then just charge with the Harlequins, and let him die on the first assault to an AP2 instant death weapon so that you can get your points, because if your warlord dies, you get points with Scarlet Epicureans. Anyways, I don't really feel or find that the other formations in the Homunculus Covens work too well, because there are too many points if you're running a pure Harlequins or semi-pure Harlequins list. Craftworld Eldar, that actually is where a lot of the problem is here, is the Phoenix Lords would seem to be really cool to run with Harlequins, but they're really expensive, so it's hard to make an effective list with Mugen Ra and Death Jesters. The basic Craft Worlds HQ, however, if you take an Autarch and give it a Banshee mask and put it on a Windrider jet bike, that is a solid option, because the Harlequins cannot be shot at with Overwatch. You can take, say, another jet bike, take a Windriders as your sole troop choice. That's actually a really cheap ally. It only has 4 models, but a Banshee mask, Windrider, Autarch with a single small troop choice with scatter lasers, and you're doing pretty good. And you're probably not even that terribly non-fluffy. A lot of the other stuff in Codex Craft Worlds, to be honest, Fire Dragons do better than Harlequins with Melta Pistols. Howling Banshees and Striking Scorpions, Striking Scorpions are probably, they're pretty good. I've faced them with my Harlequins, and you gotta play right to beat them, because they always wound with those Manda Blasters. They're pretty good in close combat versus other stuff. So Craft Worlds Eldar, it actually competes better than Harlequins. They've got more diversity, a lot of better units. I don't see a way that you're gonna ally them much when you're not using the Harlequins as just like a backup to a couple Craft World units. There are ways to, boost your, run a few Warlocks to boost your psychic powers in your Harlequins. But I've actually found that Dark Eldar, now I do have a preference for Dark Eldar, but I think Dark Eldar have been a better ally than the Craft Worlds if you're trying to run a Harlequin heavy list, because the Craft Worlds just outshine them in many aspects that the Harlequins aren't perfect at, and the Dark Eldar do seem to ally better, but that it could be a personal preference. There are a lot of the Craft Worlds special psychic powers that are pretty nice, that and the fact that they can get divination on a Farseer that can be used on Harlequins and make them much better. They don't have a good transport for Harlequins. The Dark Eldar don't have psychic powers, but they do have a few benefits from the power from pain, mostly in the Coven supplement, and their relics are nice, because the relics, a few of the Dark Eldar relics, like the Armor of Misery, can stack with the Harlequin leadership modifying shenanigans. You can do things like potentially knock 6 off a unit's leadership with the Armor of Misery, the Mask from the Harlequin's Codex, and a single death from the Death Jester. Or worse, if there were Scalpel Racks nearby, they would knock 7 off their leadership because of the freakish spectacle rule. So that's it for the allies. I didn't go into too much depth, because I when I run my Harlequins, I tend to run them all Harlequin, and most of my allies are going to be Dark Eldar, because I like my Dark Eldar far more than I like the Eldar, and the Harlequins just don't. Well, there's some goofy things you can do, like run the mask, and maybe I'll show a video of that. It's kind of fluff destroying.